Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us again today. I have with me my Deputy Governor for Budget and Economy, Dan Hines, and our IDPH Director, Ngozi Ezike. From the very beginning of our COVID-19 response, my purpose in appearing before you each day has been to fully inform our residents and to guide us through the impacts of this virus, its medical consequences, and its effects on all aspects of our way of life. I've been straightforward with you about what we know, and of equal importance, what we don't know, to make sure that you have the information that you need to keep yourselves and your loved ones safe and to help each other overcome the potentially devastating consequences of this virus. After discussing it with legislative leaders on both sides of the aisle, today I want to review with you the financial impacts of COVID-19 on our state budget and walk you through our early projections regarding the revenue shortfalls that Illinois is facing due to the impacts of COVID-19. As I do so, keep in mind that these are preliminary and estimated figures since this virus is not yet vanquished and there remains so much uncertainty still about when that will happen. Folks, you don't have to be an epidemiologist to see that the virus is going to hit our budget hard, a reality that is being visited upon every state in the United States. The bottom line is this: budget experts estimate that Illinois will have a $2.7 billion shortfall of revenues for this fiscal year and a $4.6 billion shortfall for next fiscal year. Let me dig into those numbers a little so that you can see where the challenges really lie. As a general rule of thumb, state budgets across the United States are dependent upon taxes on income, sales, and other sources such as lotteries and gaming for a substantial portion of their state budgets. In every state, the coronavirus pandemic has substantially disrupted those revenue sources. That's true regardless of political affiliation and regardless of how fast or slow a state's leadership moved to implement social distancing measures. Even those few states still operating without a stay-at-home order are facing massive fiscal hardship. This is a public health crisis, but it is accompanied by massive economic disruption that's unprecedented in modern history. Last February, when I presented a fiscal year 2021 budget proposal, my Office of Management and Budget released general funds revenue forecasts for the remainder of fiscal year 20 and for fiscal year 21. With those estimates in hand, I proposed a balanced budget, a budget that invested in our long-term strengths that will lead to our future economic growth: schools, job creation, infrastructure maintenance, human services, public safety. And I acknowledged the intractable realities of Illinois' structural budget deficiencies and proposed facing them head on. That budget proposal represented an essential next step on the path toward fiscal health for Illinois. Based on our new preliminary projections on the economic impact of COVID-19, that path has fundamentally diminished to the narrowest of paths. Let's start with fiscal year 2020. Estimates by our Department of Revenue economists show a 7% drop in our state source revenue. That's the $2.7 billion that I mentioned earlier. $1 billion of that decline is due to the 3-month extension of the April 15th deadline for filing 2019 income tax returns. Because of that extension, those revenues will be received in FY21 instead of in FY20. So in looking to close the FY20 fiscal gap, we have already begun taking steps to reduce expenditures, asking agency directors to enact spending reductions and efficiencies. And I'll remind you that earlier this year we asked those directors to identify efficiencies when we prepared for the FY21 budget and secured a savings plan of nearly $1 billion over 3 years, much of which our agencies were already moving toward ahead of schedule. That said, my cabinet members are hard at work realizing as much of those savings far sooner. Beyond that, my team has been working with the treasurer and the comptroller to leverage over $700 million in other state funds to support the operations of state government and issue up to $1.2 billion in short-term borrowing as constitutionally permitted in unexpected situations like this one. Both Treasurer Frerichs and Comptroller Mendoza have offered tremendously creative and responsible leadership in shifting our dollars to where they can be most impactful as a response to COVID-19. This is not the path any of us would choose under normal circumstances, but it is the best path available to us with the 2.5 months left in this fiscal year. Our state has made tremendous fiscal progress in the last 1.5 years, enacting a balanced budget, reducing our bill backlog by nearly $1 billion in my first year in office, and reducing our late payment penalties from the $950 million they had reached before I became governor to just over $100 million instead this fiscal year. This crisis, however, will take us off course for a little while, and we must put ourselves back on track as soon as we can. That brings me to fiscal year 2021. With our new revenue projections, my administration is estimating that there will be at least $4.6 billion less in state revenues than our Department of Revenue originally estimated, accounting for paying back the short-term borrowing that we must do in fiscal year 20. Our total budgetary gap for FY21 is $6.2 billion. And if in November the constitutional amendment to move from a flat tax to a graduated tax system doesn't pass, that budgetary gap will expand to $7.4 billion. Illinoisans are all too familiar with the pain the lack of a state budget can cause. So let me just say up front, we will not go without a state budget. We will need to make extraordinarily difficult decisions on top of the difficult decisions that we've already made. But together with the state legislature, we will make them. And we will do so with an unswerving dedication to fairness. In my inaugural address, I said that I would not balance the budget on the backs of the starving, the sick, and the suffering. It's during our most trying moments that our resolve is truly tested. Our moral character as a state is tested. So in the midst of a pandemic, I am more resolute than ever to protect those who are suffering physical and financial hardship from it. I want to express my gratitude to our Illinois congressional delegation, our senators and congressmen of both parties for their support for the first CARES Act, which provides up to $2.7 billion to cover state government expenditures in response to the pandemic. It also provides critical support for Illinois' education agencies, local governments, senior aid, transit systems, hospitals, and many other areas. This COVID response funding is very important. It will directly support our work to secure PPE and ventilators, to stand up alternate care facilities and alternate housing, to help us keep people safe and save lives. But I want to be clear. These dollars can be used to cover only new expenditures related to coronavirus. Currently, this funding cannot be used to make up for state government revenue shortfalls that have been a result of coronavirus. That leaves states to face this unprecedented financial hole on their own if the Congress doesn't pass a CARES Act 2 to support state governments. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle from across the nation have pointed out that it is absolutely critical that Congress pass another stimulus bill to assist states and territories through this crisis. The federal government acted swiftly to step in and support businesses and corporations so that they can come out on the other side of this and jumpstart the economy. But the same type of action is needed in support of state governments. This is about ensuring that in the wake of this pandemic, the nation isn't facing down a second storm standing in the way of funding for schools and healthcare, clean water and clean air, greater public safety, more job-creating small businesses, improved care for our most vulnerable children and seniors. This is about the continuity of the essential services that give people a real chance. Last year, Illinois' Republicans and Democrats alike rolled up our sleeves and produced a bipartisan, balanced budget that has begun to put our state back on a sound fiscal path. It's the most fundamental task of state government, and even under these unprecedented circumstances, it must be carried out. And it will be. Responsible leadership on both sides are committed to doing so. Illinois, when I said that we were all in this together, that's true. From Cairo to Chicago, from Rockford to Metropolis, we are one Illinois. But it's also true across the country. We are one nation. And as a nation made up of the 50 states, we are facing, by early estimates, state budget deficits of at least $500 billion, largely concentrated in this coming fiscal year. Our greatest president once said, "The legitimate object of government is to do for a community of people whatever they need to have done, but cannot do at all, or cannot so well do for themselves in their separate and individual capacities." President Lincoln's words ring true today, so we ask the Congress to do for the states what it alone can do to get us through this crisis together.